Okay, now we'll move to Committee Chair Carol Lear for the Law and Licensing Committee report.
Okay, I'm here. First item is 3.1, and it is request for waiver of board rule R277-419 for three districts actually. Duchesne, Tabiona schools only, Rich, and Tintic. The motion for the board is the committee moves the board approve the waiver requests from the 180-day requirement in R277-419 for Duchesne, Tabiona only schools, Rich, Tintic school districts.
Okay, the motion before the board. So the board approved the waiver requests from the 180-day requirement in R277-419 for Duchesne, Tabiona schools only, Rich, and Tintic school districts. Is there any discussion to that motion? The requirement in R277-419 for Duchesne, Tabiona schools only, Rich. Okay, is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. Board Member Belknap? Present for vote. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next item is item 3.2, R277-444, distribution of money to arts and science organizations, which is an amendment and continuation. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-444, distribution of money to arts and science organizations, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board continue and approve R277-444, distribution of money to arts and science organizations, draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion. Board Member Belknap.
Yes, thank you. Is this the POPs and IC programs? I just want to have clarity.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
It is? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, seeing Board Member Lear.
No, I just voted. It's a
Okay,
vote.
oh, sorry. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote, please. Board Member Marsh, Board Member Davis. Board Member Marsh, and I'm unable to see a vote. Would you like to vote vocally? Okay, so that motion passes with all votes of aye. Board Member Marsh did not cast a vote, so he would not count in that. That motion passes.
The next item is item 3.3, R277-409, public school membership and associations, which is an amendment. And the motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-409, public school membership and associations, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-409, public school membership and associations, draft 1 on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. That motion passes unanimously.
The next item is item 3.4, R277-9, standards for local education agency discipline plans and emergency safety interventions. It's amendment. And the motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-609 standards for LEA discipline plans and emergency safety interventions, draft 1, on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before us that the board approve R277-609 standards for local education agency discipline plans and emergency safety interventions, draft 1, on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. Board Member Belknap? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next item is R277, item 3.5, rule R277-615, standards and procedures for student searches, which is an amendment. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-615, standards and procedures for student searches, draft 1, on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board that the board approve R277-615 standards and procedures for student searches, draft 1, on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. That motion passes unanimously.
The next item is item 3.6, and it's a repeal due to the fact that this rule was replaced by legislation that's virtually identical in the last session. The rule number is R277-624, electronic cigarette products in schools. And the motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board repeal R277-624, electronic cigarette products in schools, on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board repeal R277-624, electronic cigarette products in schools, on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion. Board Member Cannon.
I have a question, perhaps best for Carol. My question is, typically when there is something that's in code, we write a rule to enact it throughout schools and so forth. And this one is repealing a rule and leaving us with just the code. And I'm wondering why that's happening and what I'm missing that I don't quite understand how the process is going on this. And I think it's really an important one dealing with vaping and electronic cigarettes.
I can speak to that briefly, and then probably Angie has something to add. I actually have seen this a number of times where a legislator likes a rule that we have so much that the legislator decides that should be in code rather than the administrative code. And that was my recollection of what happened here. And there wasn't any, it's very nearly identical. Sometimes the code will read a little differently, but I recall that this is very similar. Angie can add anything she'd like to.
I'd be happy to, Chair. Is that okay if I go ahead and speak?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. This is Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. And just as a little refresher of the timing of this particular rule, you may remember that Representative Pulsifer was working with a working group related to all things related to electronic cigarettes and vaping last summer and brought language to the interim committee last summer. And it was this similar language, and in an effort for us or the board to kind of take initiative, and because the legislature wasn't going to be meeting until the beginning of the following year, the board took the language from Representative Pulsifer's bill and codified it in this rule to have it take effect early. And then that language was then made effective by the legislature in May of this year with the passage of her bill. And so generally, unless we have something to supplement, we don't restate language from the Utah Code verbatim in rule. And in this case, the language of this rule is literally word for word with some amendments that were made during the session is now in Utah Code. And we don't have anything to supplement other than, if you'll notice, the rules 609, 615, 910, 460, all the rules that have just you've been taking motions on and the ones that are coming after, we incorporate in other rules references to the same legislation. It's just we didn't feel as staff that we needed to restate what is in Utah Code.
Thank you.
Just to add one more thing to that, I would have been just fine as a board member to have had the board speak on this as the constitutional authority on public schools, but obviously legislators can take the action they choose to take.
Okay, to restate the motion before us is to repeal R277624, electronic cigarette products in schools, on second and final reading. Seeing no further discussion, please vote. Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
And the next item is item 3.7, R277-910, Underage Drinking Prevention Program. There's an amendment. This again was the result of legislation. It was renamed from the previous program to a different name, adds a requirement to include instruction on the risks of underage usage of electronic cigarette products. So here's another example of incorporating this issue into a different rule. So the motion from the for the board is the committee moves that the board approve R277-910 Underage Drinking Prevention Program Draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-910 Underage Drinking Prevention Program Draft 1 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Similar issue, item 3.8, R277-460, distribution of substance abuse prevention account. And this is an amendment for a similar purpose to the previous rules to add the issue of electronic e-cigarette vaping prevention efforts. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-460, distribution of substance abuse prevention account, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-460, distribution of substance abuse prevention account, draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, please vote.
Oops, there we go.
That motion passes unanimously.
Next item is item 3.9, R277-924, Partnerships for Student Success Grant Program. It's an amendment. There's an evaluation component that was changed that can now be done in-house as opposed to by a third-party provider. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-924, Partnerships for Student Success Grant Program, draft 1 on second and final reading.
The motion before the board is to approve R277-924, Partnerships for Student Success Grant Program, draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. That motion passes unanimously.
Next item 3.10, we're done with the e-cigarettes for a moment. R277-303, education preparation programs. This is for amendment and continuation. I thought it was noteworthy that this, the staff made the effort to contact various stakeholders and proposed a few changes based on their discussions with other stakeholders. The motion for the board is the committee moves that the board continue and approve R277-303 Education Preparation Programs Draft 1 on second and final reading.
The motion before the board is that the board continue and approve R277-303 Educator Preparation Programs Draft 1 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion. Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I have another question on this one. It says that they're recommending changes to the rule made from feedback from stakeholders, and yet we have a draft 1. So I guess the committee didn't change anything. Could you just tell us briefly maybe what some of the changes were that were enacted in this draft 1?
And being the board chair, I will defer to Angie if Ben's online, or if our new licensing person wants to speak to that.
Chair, I might offer Jennifer Thronson. She might be the best person to speak to this.
That's perfect. Anybody other than me?
Hey, Jennifer, if you'd like to speak to it.
Sure. I am Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. If you'll repeat the question, I get distracted with the meeting and the emails, so I apologize. God
damn.
Board Member Cannon, can you repeat the question? Board Member Lear, would you like to summarize her question?
Yes, I would. She was asking, Board Member Cannon was asking Jennifer to summarize the changes, and then secondly, when and how did these changes come about that we're still being asked to vote on draft 1?
Okay, so for 303, there are any changes for this one. This one came about mostly through the deans and faculty in higher education. As they went to implement this rule that we had amended previously, they were finding some redundancy, they were finding some implementation issues, such as it required every teacher candidate to have experience with a school counselor. And as you all know, we don't have school counselors in every building. And so that was causing some implementation issues, as well as we've identified some high leverage instructional practices that we wanted to have embedded in there, and the deans and faculties were supportive of. So the changes really were brought to our attention through higher education, and with respect to they were very relevant. There was a lot of redundancy. So as you look at the rule, it looks overwhelming in terms of the amount of change, but truly it's level of reducing redundancy, moving them into one clear spot where they might have been repetitive throughout the document. So there's not substantial content changes. It really is a reduction in redundancy that they expected us to see. And it looks like Ben said the rule initially passed last July. So this is just kind of, as they went to implement the changes, the kind of implementation issues they were seeing and facing, and our response to that was, oh, absolutely, as we saw those opportunities for improvement to improve clarity as well as the teacher preparation experience.
Okay, thank you. I see no further discussion. The motion before us is to continue and approve R277-303 Educator Preparation Programs Draft 1 on second and final reading. Please vote. Board Member Newell. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. There's one abstention. Board Member Cindy Davis.
Oh, and I meant to say that Board Member Davis also abstained in the committee not discussion, because she was very informative, but in in the vote. So thank you
Thank you.
for voting that. The next item is item 3.11. This was what took most of our time in the committee meeting. This is R277-552, where the charter board, well, the name of the rule is Charter School Timelines and Approval Processes Amendments. This is the horse that came after the cart from last board meeting's discussion of a process for to be timelines and approval process for charter schools and for the satellites and expansions. And we had extensive discussion of this, thanks to Board Member Cummins for her many thoughtful amendments. We also had a number of public individuals from the public who participated. So we discussed it to death. The motion for the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-552 charter school timelines and approval processes, draft 5 on second and final reading.
The motion before us is that the board approve R277-552 charter school timelines and approval processes, draft 5 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote.
Chair,
Oh, sorry.
Vice Chair Cummins, I
Yes.
apologize. This is Angie Stallings. May I say something?
Yes.
I apologize. I failed to remind Committee Chair Lear that since the committee meeting, there were 2 items that staff requested be updated. One was fairly technical. I'm trying to remember the 2 issues right now, but you'll notice there is a draft 6 posted on Civic Clerk, and staff would request that the board approve draft 6 in lieu of draft 5.
So Board Member Lear, would you like to make a motion to amend the motion?
Yes, I'm just trying to see draft 6 on the, and I don't see it posted. No, I'm in the wrong place. Let me just, before I make the motion, I'd like to see what I'm making a motion about. So give me a minute.
And Vice Chair Cummins, if you'd like, I can describe the first one. One of the changes is on lines 134 and 130 through 136 of draft 6. And that is related to a process where the authorizer would verify before a school is operational that the school has complied with all of the pre-operational requirements. And so you can see that we've asked that the authorizers submit a copy of their process to verify all of that. Those conditions have been verified before pre-operation. The second, and I believe the second was on line 210, adding the expanding school or LEA, just adding or LEA. And then also on lines 239 through 242, we added just a clarification. I think, and Ben, if you're on and you can remind me where lines.
So if I may, Angie, Chair. So on the language Angie's referring to is also, was moved also on lines 332 to 334. State Charter School Board staff recommended that we simply move that in the rule in the 2 places so that it wasn't part of the preliminary approvals that were made by staff in determining whether to do to approve an expansion or a replication, but it was moved to the section where the governing board would be the one to look at those elements and make the call on whether they met that criteria. So we're simply, it's a requirement either way, but we're moving the decision. We're recommending that we move who the decision maker is and what the timing is for looking at those particular requirements.
Right. And the correction I'd make to that is it doesn't have to do with, we took the word replication out of this rule altogether. So it's only for expansions and satellites, because replication doesn't appear in statute. So it's a expansion or a satellite. So you want me to make the motion now again?
Yes,
Are you ready for
if
that?
you'd like to make an amendment,
Draft
to,
6.
yeah,
So let me just repeat the motion then. I'll say it again. The committee moves that the board approve R277-552 charter school timelines and approval process draft 6 on first. Well, it's not really the draft.
remember, Lear, we can't change the, we can't unilaterally change the motion made at committee. So if you'd like to make a motion to amend, and then we would change from drafts 5 to 6.
Okay, then I make the motion that the committee's motion be amended to say draft 6 and draft instead of draft 5.
And I'll second it, Mark Huntsman.
Okay, thank you. The motion, the amendment before us is to change draft 5 to draft 6. Is there discussion to that motion, that amendment? Okay, seeing no discussion, the amendment before us is to change draft 5 to draft 6. Please vote. Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. So the main motion that we are back to is that the committee, excuse me, that the board approve R277-552 charter school timelines and approval process draft 6 on second and final reading. Okay, is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, please vote. That passes unanimously.
Final item 3.12, R277-50, charter school definitions amendment. There were some new definitions added. And so the motion is to this definitional rule for charter schools. The motion for the board is the committee moves that the board approve R277-550 charter school definitions draft 3 on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-550 charter school definitions draft 3 on second and final reading. Discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. That motion passes unanimously. Is that the end of
And
your?
the last item we did not. Yes, we didn't have time for the last item.
Okay, thank you.